introduce myself, my name is Sylvia Gill. I am the manager of our Daniel Jordan Fiddle Foundation Transition and Adult Team. And we have Natalie.
Hello, welcome everyone to the training. So I'm Natalie Roman, I'm a case manager. I work with Sylvia. We work out of our Miramar office, but of course we're working remotely right now. I will be in the chat if you have any questions during the presentation, but if not, we will have a question and answer session at the end. So thank you so much for joining us.
All right, thank you guys. And so as we start to look at some of the effective communication, what we want to talk about today is kind of giving you really the tools to kind of understand what is your current mindset and what are some of the challenges you are facing when it comes to communicating with your team and really setting some realistic goals. How do we collaborate with our team and really develop those self-determined attainable goals, as well as not only the theory of it, but how do we do it? What are the strategies? What are some of the accommodations they need? And how do we reward some of those behaviors to really make them more independent? And so the first thing you really want to look at is, what are your challenges? What are things that your teen and adult are struggling with? What are you struggling with? And what skills do we want them to be able to achieve? So it's kind of really recognizing some of those challenges. And as we look at the challenges, we have to look at what is their level of independence. And a lot of the times when we talk to our parents of teens and adults, they tell us, yeah, they're very independent. But when we start to look at the actual skill set, are they able to achieve goals when they're not influenced by the thought or action of others? They're not dependent or waiting for you to kind of prompt them to do things, or relying on you or others for that support. And so when we try to see, really, can our teens and adults do this on their own? Are they independent? We're looking at these kind of three categories. And when you look at the reality of independence is, can my teen or adult, are they able to initiate and complete the task? The big one, can they ask for help? And we see this a lot in employment. They're given a task and they're kind of stuck, but they don't really know how to ask for help or what ways to get help. Using visuals and other types of supports, as well as accessing those supports and people resources to be independent as possible, which is usually always our big goal. And when we start to kind of think about what goals do we want to set, how do we want to do this, we want to ask ourselves, which tasks are they able to complete with minimal support? What can they do independently? And then what requires more support to complete? And what are they most motivated to do? So as you start to think, what are goals we want to set for our teens and adults? What do we want to do to create that independence? We need to kind of ask ourselves these types of questions. And when we talk about independence, what skills do we want them to do? Do we want them to be able to manage their own money or transportation? How to cook, how to clean, maybe drive? What type of level of graduation do we want them to go to college, or technical skills? Even as simple as waking up on their own. And this is just something that we can start with. Can they set their own alarm? Can they wake up? Can they, practice those hygiene skills and brushing their teeth without a lot of that support, or what we like to kind of feel as that nagging? Come on, let's wake up, let's do this. And so we want to start to see, where is my child? Where's that teen and adult, and what level of support do they need, and how independent are they at this point? And before we get started, before we start to see what goals do we want, I want you to kind of take a step back and evaluate your own mindset. Evaluate, how are we communicating with our teen and adults? And sometimes we have to ask ourselves, am I wanting them to do this perfectly without making those mistakes? And maybe that's why it's not being successful. Or do I expect them to do it without any support? So I want you to apply for a job, but we're not giving them the level of support, or complete chores without, a visual task analysis, which we'll talk about later. And then also thinking the individual is independent and not realizing that we actually provide a lot of support. And so sometimes our parents will say, well, they can do that. But I ask them, well, if you weren't there to, to remind them, to set them, to prompt them, could they actually do it? And a lot of the times the answer could be no. Another one is really, did we forget to teach prerequisite skills? So if I want them to cook, but if they're not able to chop things, if they're not able to get the ingredients, and they're not able to do the prerequisite skill, how are they able to accomplish their goals? A big one we get a lot is they're adults, they're teens, they should know how to do this by now. Why wouldn't they know how to do this? And we have to ask ourselves, well, maybe they just don't have that enough opportunity for practice. Maybe we're doing everything for them where they're not providing that practice, because maybe it takes too long or they're making mistakes. So that's another thinking trap we get into. A lot of the times is failing to recognize the attempt or the effort. So they are working on goals, but we're only focused on, well, you didn't go all the way. And sometimes we have to take a step back and say, okay, did we really recognize at least that they tried? Did they attempt something that was new and difficult for them? A big one, and I'm guilty as a mom, is wanting to make life easier for our loved one. And so my daughter, I noticed, she takes a shower and she waits for me to dress her. And she's 6, which by then we want her to be independent. But sometimes I dressed her and I did things and I put shoes on, realizing, I wasn't giving her that opportunity to achieve that independence because I was just doing it to make it easier for them. And a lot of it is afraid to allow them to have consequences. As adults, the older we get, the bigger the consequence. And, as they're growing up, sometimes we didn't allow for them to have some of those natural consequences. And as a parent, we really kind of get used to when they're younger, really telling them, this is what I want you to do. This is the school you're going to go to. This is how I want you to clean your room. And this is how I want things done. And we need to start shifting that. We are shifting from mom and dad being the decision makers to how do I collaborate? How do we talk about this together when we're setting goals, when we're communicating? And that collaboration really builds that trust, that teamwork. And it's kind of, again, with our mindset, we need to shift it. We need to shift that parental role into that collaborative process. And why do we want to do that? And the reason why we want to have them involved and be a part of this goal setting is it really capitalizes on their existing motivation. A lot of the times, your goals and your ideas for your child is very different from them. And maybe you want them to participate in a specific program, have a specific career, live in a certain place. And when you really kind of sit down and talk to them, that's not their plan. That's not what they want to do. And so if their input is not in there, really, it's not going to be very motivating for them to want to achieve those goals. A lot of the times when we even provide choices, it kind of increases their motivation. So for me, when I have choice, when I feel a part of that decision, there is more compliance, there is more motivation. And a lot of it is it teaches that self-advocacy skills. We want them at the table. We want them to really start taking control of some of the decisions that are going to happen in their lives. And so we want to teach that self-advocacy skills. And in teens and adults are not involved, it continues to build this dependence on parents. And I see it all the time where I'm having a conversation with one of our adults and something as simple as, what do you like to do? And they look at mom. Mom, what is it I like to do? And so what we want them to start to doing is saying, I can really start to practice making decisions, explaining things that I like on my own, because the more I practice, the more it's going to build my confidence in making decisions. So again, we're shifting that parental, okay, this is what we're going to do, to a collaborative process, to making them a part of it, because it really does help with their motivation. And it also helps them in building that confidence that, I can make certain decisions for myself. And guess what? There's going to be mistakes. And as a parent, it's so hard to know, oh my goodness, I know what they're choosing and I know it's not going to end well. And even if we feel that way, we have to allow that teen and adult to take a chance, just as we all did. And really, when they're making those choices, teaching them every choice you make and every goal you set, let's weigh in those pros and cons. What are the pros of you making this choice or setting this goal? And what are the cons? Having them list it and really work out that problem solving that we typically do quickly, having them to be a part of that, and then making them responsible to deal with the consequences. If I have a job and I show up late and I'm not doing the things that I need to be doing, I'm going to get fired. And that's part of a consequence. That's something they may have to experience to then really work on some of their behaviors. Allowing choices within limited range of options. So, if our teen and adult struggles with making choices and goals, maybe set 2 or 3 and say, okay, within this, what do you think? And then, as we know, failures build resilience, and that's been a part of our own lives, and reflecting on ourselves is we've learned from our past mistakes, and that's something our adults, even on the spectrum, and as hard as it is, we have to allow them to experience those types of safe failures. Again, learning anything involves making those mistakes, and it's ideal to make those mistakes. And I always say, we as parents, we're their safety net, right? We provide that support. And we want them to make those mistakes while we're still there to provide the supports, because what if we make these mistakes and then we're no longer here to help them, to guide them and support them? So understanding that mistakes will be made, and understanding that they do have to kind of experience some of those natural consequences, as hard as it is for us to kind of manage and feel that. And so as we start to think, what are some goals? What do we want to have this conversation? We don't want to start the conversation when they're in the middle of their favorite show and you shut it off and say, okay, we're going to talk about goals, or springing it upon them when they're on their computer game. We want to be strategic about having these conversations, especially when we start doing these big shifts of change. And what the best way to do is set up a time. Hey, I want to talk to you about, and especially right now is the best time to have these conversations. Right now we're home. A lot of things have shifted and changed, and I want us to sit down and let's talk. Let's come up with a time, a date, where we can have these conversations and set goals for maybe when things open up, or we're gonna talk about maybe transitioning out of high school, and have them already be a part of that. Hey, when do you think? When are you available? When is it a good time? We want to do it. My daughter is not a morning person, so if I asked her at 8 in the morning, hey, we're going to set some goals, already the conversation shuts down. So really we're shifting as to when is it a good time, when do you know they're not so distracted, to discuss those new expectations. And so again, it's about the preparation. As you know, when we want to spring up change, when we want to have these tough conversations, we need to really have that preparation. And so we talk about that upcoming planning session. What is it going to involve? And emphasizing that it's about them. It's about you. And I want to know, what are your goals? What do you want to achieve? And then as parents, how do we help you get there? And a lot of it is the why. So as an adult, we have new responsibilities. We need to learn about money. We need to learn about, if maybe a goal is being independent at home, what are the skills do we need to achieve that? And really making it about them and not something that you want them to do. And so it's really working with your teen, working with that teen and adult. And remember, this isn't a list of rules. So it isn't about, hey, I made this for you and this is what I want you to start doing. So remember, we're shifting to that collaboration. So we're going to collaboratively choose a goal, and we're going to create the plan together. And then really we want to know, what is the goal your teen is motivated to work on? I also want you to, as you guys start this, is start to think, what are things that they're good at? A lot of our teens and adults have experienced a lot of failure. And so sometimes they don't want to try because they think, well, I'm not going to do good. I'm not going to be good at this. So let's start with something really simple, to attain, so that they can taste that a success. Once they kind of have that taste, then we're going to continue to move on. And that could be as simple as, you're going to get your phone, we're going to set an alarm, and you're going to wake up on your own. So we can start as something simple that they can do on their own. And so you see, you did this on your own, you set your alarm, and you were able to wake up. Help your loved ones plan for success by discussing the supports. And we're going to go a whole section of what are the level of supports that they're going to need to achieve that. And I want you to be able to ask your teen and adult, what do you think is an appropriate reward, and what are appropriate consequences? So a lot of our teens and our adults, sometimes their reinforcement is money. Is that an appropriate reward or TV time? And we'll talk a little bit about examples of consequences and privileges. And when you really start to look at my goals, I want you to always say, we're going to plan SMART goals. Are they specific? So is it something really specific that, not, I want to be independent. Okay, well, that's great, but there's so many layers of independence. So is it managing money? Is it, I'll give you guys some examples, but is it measurable? Can we really see, are they able to do that? Again, is it something achievable? We want them to start setting goals that we know they can be successful, because that's going to really start motivating them. And again, are they realistic and are they timely? So we want to look at some of those immediate goals, not goals, when you're 30 or 10 years from now or 5 years. Let's look at something where can we work on this within the next month? And it really starts with the buy-in, because if you're teen and adult, there's no buy-in. It's going to be you kind of pushing, and we want to make sure that this kind of approach is more of a collaborative approach. So this is why we want to involve the adult. Encourage and ask questions. So we have a tendency to talk a lot as parents. And sometimes, if they don't naturally are able to express themselves, ask questions for them to be able to communicate that. Help them make decisions and talk about what motivates them. Again, using that explanation. So I want you to wash the dishes because I want you to wash the dishes. Why? So we're gonna learn to wash dishes because if you want to live on your own, this is a skill we need to work on, or vacuuming, or all sorts of different independent skills. Again, providing choices. So if we want to work on some of those life skills, which we'll talk a lot about next week, what are some of this, maybe simple goals that they can start with? We want to schedule the activities. Again, a lot of that input from them even on their rewards and consequences, and talk about their concerns. What are you worried about? So if maybe employment might be something you want as a goal, what are their concerns about working? What are their concerns about starting a specific program? And really validating their ideas and opinions. So if they come up with a goal that, it's really not something you think they should be doing, let's validate their ideas. I really think that's great, but, we want to work on something that's timely. Let's think of our SMART goal. Is it timely? Is it measurable? But really just not dismissing them, validating, and then trying to redirect. So a lot of it is doing your homework, and this is step one. So I appreciate you guys being here, especially because I know how busy our schedules are. But doing your homework is prioritizing your goals. What are things that we want kind of done immediately? Think about how can the goal be broken down. So if I have a certain goal, break it down into steps. So if I say, I really want to be healthy and I want to exercise, I'm not going to start with a half marathon. It might just even be going around the block. For 5 minutes, I'm not going to be on the TV, and I'm going to start to live, incorporate exercising by doing 5 minutes of exercise, and 20 and 30, and then building up. Again, over prepare. It's better to have more supports and then take away than have them start to taste that failure, and then they're not going to want to do it because they didn't have the support. Create a tentative schedule. What is the day and time we're going to work on this, the times per day, week, or month, where are we going to work on this? Again, we're going to plan needed supports, availability of supports, and creating visuals, which we're going to talk a little bit later. And so when we talk about choosing goals, we know that goals guide behavior and choices. So we want to set goals and record them, increases chances of attaining them. And we don't want to focus on so many. So even for right now, it might be good. Let's just focus on one goal. And what we want to consider is, what are they motivated to do? Is there a current need to address this goal? Does a large goal need to be broken down into action steps? So maybe taking a very big goal as to, I want to live on my own, into all these small action steps. What goal will make an impact in his or her life? Are there opportunities to practice? So this is a big one. If we are choosing a goal, am I providing ample opportunities for them to practice that? And are the goals, are there goals that may impact their employment, friendships, and other types of goals? And so these can just be some of them. Again, we're going to email you all of this, so I know I'm going a little quick, but I want to make sure we cover everything. But, again, some of those goals can even be doing chores, watching less TV and playing less video games, doing my own grocery shopping, using public transportation, going to school, getting a pet. So all of these, again, this is very individualized for the adult and the teen, as well as your family, as to what do you think it's needed right now to set those goals. And there are consequences and privileges. So the biggest thing when we're talking about goal setting and communication is clear expectations. What happens if the goal is followed versus what happens if it's not followed? And that's why we like to use contracts. Because the biggest thing as part of an adult is it's guided by your choice. Did you do this? Then that's what gets you the privilege or the consequence. It's not mom's decision, it's not dad's decision. As an adult, it's on you. And so that's why these contracts are really helpful. And also be willing to enforce the consequence. So, we don't want to say, hey, if you do this, if you don't do this, you're not going to eat, because that's not something that we can really reinforce. So making sure that what we decide, whether it's a consequence or privilege, we can actually reinforce. Because the truth is, you lose credibility. Once they know mom's not going to really do it, dad's not going to follow through, why should I have to do it? And so kind of being strict and saying, hey, listen, look at that piece of paper. You signed it. And we'll talk a little bit about the contract, but this is something you decided to do, not mom. It's not on mom, it's on you. And then discussing about some freebies as well. And so when we look at some of the consequence, as you are giving a consequence, because I've heard many hurtful things from my own kid, reinforcing that you do love them, even when you provide a consequence. So if the consequence is, I'm really sorry, you're not able to play, now everyone's into Animal Crossing, we're not playing the Switch tonight, that's a really big consequence. You didn't do what we talked about, there is no video games tonight. I love you, this is something that you need to experience. And if you want to do this tomorrow, tomorrow we're going to work on our goal, and then you get to have the privilege that we talked about. Again, privileges and consequence should be as natural and logical as possible. So you do this, you get this. You don't do it, then that's the consequence. And renegotiation is based on progress. So we may have to make adjustments. And we'll talk a little bit about check-ins, but we can set up a plan, and if it's not working, we may have to renegotiate and say, maybe they need more support. Maybe we need to break down the goal a little bit less and renegotiate that process. And then this can be some examples. So some of the consequences we can talk about is either limiting or eliminated access to their preferred activity. For example, for my daughter, the Switch, Nintendo is a huge motivator. So she's got to work on her goals and do her things if she wants access to that. Wi-Fi is very popular. If you don't do this, mom unplugs the Wi-Fi, and that's that. Or car or allowance. And then also focusing on privileges. Being able to spend money and allowance, driving to activities, movies and gaming. Again, I think a big part of it is, are they a part of this conversation? Are you using something that really motivates them? And this will be kind of a sample plan that we created. So again, we're going to email this to you, but just kind of breaking it down and having this conversation. What's the long-term goal? What are the actions that I need? So if my long-term goal is employment, I want a job. Okay, well, what's the reason? Why do you want a job? Do you want to make money? Do you want to be able to eventually live on your own? Now, what are the skills I need? What do I have to do? I need a resume. I need to be able to apply for things. And then putting the X, that's how I can track it. Did I work on it on Monday? Did I work on it on Tuesday? And saying, you know what, we're going to work on it 3 days a week, 2 days a week. And starting small and knowing your child. And talking about what supports. Do we need visual supports, reminders? And then the plan will be reviewed. So this is a big one. Once I have my action steps, once I have the goals, how are we reviewing this? How are we talking about it and doing these kind of check-ins? And again, the responsibility starts to go on the teen and adult. This is their contract. This is their plan, not mom and dad's. And, if you want the consequences, the privileges, it's on you. And this is just a really easy way to kind of track that. So how do we kind of check in and stay on track? The big thing is, and us moms, dads too, we have this naggy role, right? Where it's like, did you do it? Did you apply? Did you work on it? And when we start with that, teens and our adults are like, I'm done. And so we really kind of want to set that aside and just say, hey, 2 days a week, we're going to schedule check-ins. How's it going? Did you work on this? And then, we'll talk a little bit about praise, but even reinforcing when they're doing that. I think we want to try to avoid the blaming. You didn't do this. Instead, you did that. And once we start to do that, there's a disconnect in our communication. Really trying to do it by the facts, using that sample sheet, and having those conversations. And instead of blaming, we can ask questions. So what happened that, and talking about the Socratic method, the ask versus tell. We're shifting from telling and we're going to ask them questions. So let's look at it. What's working for you? Where did you get stuck? What prevented it from happening? Or where do you need help? What can I do to help you? And so when I ask questions and I try to gauge their perspective, that nagginess goes away and they're going to have that ability to open up and tell us. And for those that may not be able to express that, we are going to give you some support that you could still implement these things even with limited language. And let's get honest, change is not easy. Given this pandemic and all of us changing so much of our everyday life, it's tough. And this is going to be a big change for them implementing new goals. And just know, sorry to tell you, it gets worse before it gets better. And so having that mindset and not giving up. And knowing that the alternative is saying that, well, if I don't set goals, if we don't try this, everything will stay the same. They're not going to learn new skills, and that may not be okay for a lot of us. Making sure that we're consistent. So going back to the plan, be consistent. If they don't follow through, they don't get the reward, or they have to experience that consequence. And also keep in mind, our teens and adults have years of reinforcement history. So sometimes it's a bit harder for them to change their mindset and implement these new goals. Again, starting with something small and realistic. We want them to succeed. When they start to feel like, wow, I really can do this, then we'll implement bigger goals. And again, choosing the consequences that you can carry through. Do not set consequences that it's not possible for you to carry through, or a privilege. So we don't want to offer $20 to do the dishes if financially we can't give them $20. So being realistic with what you can and cannot give. And another one is having caregivers need to be on board. So, if mom and dad are in the picture, or grandma, or whoever is kind of involved, making sure everyone sees this plan. We're all looking at it, we're all in agreement, we're all going to sign. And again, putting reminders on your calendars. So we're learning new behaviors too. And so now I'm going to kind of go into the strategy. So what are different supports that we can start to implement to achieve our goals? And there's a lot of supports that we can do. Again, this is going to be based on what works for your teen and adult. And we want to look at choice boards. Again, we talked a lot about choices, whether they're visual schedules or checklists, alarm and reminders, calendars, task analysis, photos, and using our phones. And I want you to also think about how many supports do we personally use. I myself need my calendar. I need to set reminders. I've got 2 small kids, a lot of things going on, and it's easy for me to miss things. So it's kind of really important. Set those strategies, and they need that support just as much as we all use it. And so when we talk about supports and setting options, I can give them this schedule, whether it's a visual or just a checklist, so you can kind of see the range of what works for you. What do you want to do? Let's pick 3 skills that we're going to work on today. Or let's look at the cleaning schedule. I need one thing from each category done. What do you want to do? And again, that choice makes it more motivating for them to actually accomplish it. Creating opportunities and having their input. So choice points are really helpful. And again, you want to provide choices that are realistic, that you can do. So here are the choices. What is it you want to do? Do you want to load dishes? Do you want to hang the clothes, match socks? And starting, this is a nice visual to kind of see what are some easy tasks that we could start with and start to move our way up. And even individualized visual schedules. So this is extremely helpful, especially because our adults like to see themselves. So, even utilizing your own real life photos and saying, okay, this is everything that needs to happen. And And especially now that our schedules are really changed and we're home a lot, this is a good time to start implementing, how do I build a schedule? Have them make it themselves. Have them be a part of that, and then using the photos. So we're gonna wake up, then you're gonna make your bed, then you're gonna eat your breakfast, and then you can revert back to check your schedule, so that they start depending on their schedule, not so much on us. So, let's put supports where they know how to utilize their supports rather than, hey mom, what's next? Mom, what do I do next? Or I don't know what to do. And the individual schedule can be as simple as just typing it up, writing it down. So I just want you to see the range from utilizing visuals, with pictures, or even just writing it on a piece of paper. Task analysis are extremely helpful, especially when we want to break down tasks. So if I want my teen or adult to start really brushing their teeth independently, if you start to realize there's a lot of steps rather than just go brush your teeth, and again, look at those prerequisite skills. Can they open up the toothbrush? Can they turn on the water? Do they have the motor skills to do that? And so we start to look at really all those skills, breaking it down so they can start doing that independently. Same thing with laundry. Step one, turn it on. This is what you need to do. This is how you put it away. Really giving them the skills that eventually we can wean off of them. And don't reinvent the wheel. There's so many of these things online, and you can always ask, and we can help you find some of those visual supports. Another one is using technology. YouTube, let me tell you, there's a video for everything. So if you want them to learn a specific skill, you can YouTube it. You can record yourself doing it, especially because let's say we're working with a specific dishwasher or washer dryer. Video it, having them complete it or yourself, and having them depend on that, not so much you. So that's where we want to shift the levels of support. And praising. So once we start implementing the supports, we've got the goals, we really want to start praising their attempts. So, keep it positive and avoid hinting at past weaknesses. Sometimes we can over critique. Oh, you never do this, and that's not how you do it. But just really making sure you reinforce them, especially for their efforts. Make sure it's appropriate. So even my 6-year-old, if I'm like, good job, she looks at me like, mom, seriously? And so making sure the way we're communicating is appropriate for their age. As praise happens, independence is promoted. And we always want to praise specifically. So I really like the way you did X, Y, Z. Because then they start to realize, oh, that's what she wants me to do. Make sure it's sincere. So if you're like, oh, good job, they know. So we want to make sure as I'm praising, as I'm giving feedback, it is sincere and effort and progress is noted. And sometimes it's not about achieving the goals, but are they taking active steps to really try? Maybe they're not employed, but you saw they wrote a resume, you saw that they're applying, they're looking for jobs. And so we have to really recognize their effort as well. And so why should we praise? So effective praise teaches your teen adult positive behavior. It really strengthens the behavior and builds their self-esteem. And the main thing of effective communication, especially with your teen adult, is providing that positive relationship. A lot of the times as parents, and it's a hard job to have, it's the naggy, it's the come on guys, your teens, your adults, you should have this. But we really want to start praising because that really builds on that more positive environment and a positive relationship. And again, utilizing even visuals to track that. So what am I working for? If I have to really break it down, I'm praising, hey, you do this 5 times, we're going to get iPad time. Or looking at the chore chart, if it's check marks and whatever motivates them, being able to even track the praise. And making it fun. So you know what, this isn't just John's goal, it's all our goals. So we're going to do this and we're going to have chore charts or even involving the siblings in some of those goals. Chore bingo. And I'm sure Natalie, for next week, those of you to join us for independent and life skills, will share more about this. And so some more tips for praising. We always say 3 praises to 1 criticism. Again, being consistent. That's the best advice. As a parent, if I say something, I follow through. And that even means a privilege. So If I promise you a pizza party, you're getting that pizza, on Friday. So making sure that you're consistent on that and being genuine. Again, don't wear it out. So I know that a lot of us, okay, we're gonna praise, but if I am like, good job, good job, good job, good job, it doesn't really mean anything. And so that's why we use a lot of labeled praise. So label the skill and describe the specific behavior that you really, are proud of. So I appreciate you completing your goal of applying to 2 jobs a week, and praise for completion of independent activities. So, the small achievements. And really kind of making sure, are they self-monitoring? So again, it's a collaborative approach. This is not just your teen and adult doing it on their own. It's not just you monitoring it. They should monitor themselves. How are they doing on their behaviors? That self-observation. So identify the target behavior and report it. And I'm going to show you now how you could do that with something like this. So this can be a self-monitoring chart. Talking about those check-ins. So, okay, let's look at it on Monday. Did I complete it? If not, why didn't I complete it? Or what time did I start? How long did it take me? And really, what supports, and this is kind of a nice way to track things, just to see where are they and do we need to make some adjustments. But again, making them responsible for their own action and their goals. And we all need support. So, especially now, right? So with that support, find support for yourself. So make time for, positive people, experience interactions, and acknowledge and deal with your emotions. And a big thing, and a lot of parents I talk to, is that guilt. They're not independent because I did this or I'm doing this. Well, now, really start to reflect, take away that guilt, and start doing that collaborative process. Support for your teen and adult child. We have to address some of those mental health issues, whether it's anxiety, depression, attention, they get stuck. And so this is kind of a really nice way to say, okay, let's set some new goals. Let's, whether it is dealing with anxiety, dealing with, learning coping skills. And so a lot of that we do have to address. And again, utilize professionals, whether it's your therapist, a behavior therapist, or a life coach. If the goal becomes too much or it's not really achievable, let's start thinking of, can we use a psychologist, therapist to really help implement certain strategies, especially the communication between you and your child. And so what we want to do is rinse and repeat. So again, be realistic. So in the beginning, so now as you kind of start thinking about this and reflecting, work on the goal and simultaneously learning the process. So choosing that realistic goal that we know they can be successful. Again, being persistent. So initial behavior change, I hate to tell you guys, it takes a lot of effort, even for ourselves, learning some new skills or goals. And a big thing is generalizing. So if, let's say the goal was, we did laundry, well now can we generalize those goals to do other skills, to learn other chores, and other things around the house. And again, being flexible, and that's something I work on. So sometimes we have to adjust and modify and customize. So not just saying, forget it, we're not going to do this goal, I give up. Let's look back and see, do I need supports? Do I need to change? Or maybe the motivation isn't that motivating. If I say, you do this and you get TV time, but they don't really care to watch TV, then we have to be flexible and change that. And know that this is a work in progress. So what I want you guys to do is focus on the positive. And I know this is hard to do now, but, focus on the positive changes that they're making. And we must create the change we want. I don't want you to overreact to setbacks. There are going to be setbacks, and we just have to kind of, again, go back to your planning sheets and see maybe where do we need to shift and adjust. And know that change is uncomfortable for everyone. So when we start to kind of impose these goals and things that we want our teens and adults to do, and even having these talks and communication, know that it's tough. And again, be patient with yourself, your adults, and others. We want to be compassionate. There are things you may not understand, but play a role in your adults' motivations. And that's why we want them, they have to be very much a part of this conversation. They have to, want to know that they're listened and they're validated, just as any of us as adults want to feel. Because we want to be heard. And when we feel like someone is imposing their goals on us, and think of our own parent situations, we want to make sure that they're involved in this, and we're appreciated without judgment, and develop. And a big, I think, what would be fun is complete one with them. Print out that sheet and say, you know what, I want some goals. So maybe some goals during this time is I'm going to be healthy, I'm going to exercise, and we can do this together. What are some supports I need? What are things that I want? And so I really want you to maybe make this something fun, something you can experience with your teen and adult, and also set goals for yourself. So that's it for now. I just quickly want to share with you our card contact information. Those of you that are joining us, I appreciate it. If you do feel stuck and you're not sure, if you need more supports, if you want to have that conversation, reach out to your card clinician. If you're not sure who it is, call the main line that's there. And also we have a ton of really great trainings coming up, events. So make sure you check out the link tree as well.